Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. I've got a lot to say and not a lot of time, so without further ado, let's get into it. So in South Africa, marine shore-based and estuarine fisheries are placing considerable effort and pressure on estuarine and marine resources. Both these fisheries in South Africa are poorly governed and struggle with compliance and regulations, such as bags and size limits. And this now poses one of the greatest sustainability threats to our estuarine-dependent species, and poses one of the major threats to the Dusky cob, the most targeted estuarine-dependent species in both these fisheries. Anglers from both these fisheries have, however, been found to be more compliant with spatial protection regulations. So the Dusky cob, Argyrosomus japonicus, or Kabeljo, Meeg, or Malawi, depending from where you are or where you are from around the world, is a large coastal cyanid reaching up to 2 meters in length and weighing up to 80 kilograms. They're known to have complex life histories with a juvenile estuarine phase, late maturity, slow growth, and predictable behavior. Around about 25 years ago now, the stock status of Dusky cob in South Africa was described as collapsed, and catch rates have continued to decline. Currently, they are estimated to sit between 1.5 and 3% of pristine spawning biomass numbers. Within South Africa, the species is managed with a minimum size limit of 60 centimeters and a bag limit of 1 fish per person daily. Yet these measures are still considered largely ineffective. So, within South Africa, we have 3 different species of cob, and no, I am not showing you three of the same picture here, just slightly colored a little bit differently. These are actually 3 different species: the Dusky, which I've already talked about, the silver cob, and the square-tailed cob. Now, all 3 of these species used to play an important role in South Africa's commercial line fishery. However, with the decline of stock and the decline of the commercial line fishery, it is now said that recreational anglers are the #1 problem putting effort onto these species. And as you can see, well, with all 3 of them looking so similar, they also all have overlapping distributions. And as you can imagine, for the average Joe fisherman busy out on his boat, out at sea, just trying to catch some cob for the day, it is an absolute nightmare to try and tell the difference without having any sort of comparison. And as you can also see, it has made our management and our regulations within South Africa an absolute nightmare. So at the current moment, recently assessed, silver cob and square-tailed cob have been said to have increasing populations, and the Duskies a decreasing population. And it kind of has to make one wonder, why are our Duskies going down? Well, one key factor could be that the Duskies enter nearshore coastal zones and estuaries, while the other 2 do not. And as I just said just now, these estuarine areas and coastal zones are under extreme amounts of pressure from recreational anglers. So in August of 2022, a work package led by Professor Kerry Sink here in South Africa set out to make a conservation strategy for the threatened Argyrosomus species of South Africa. This workshop yielded an extensive list of threats, objectives, action plans, and research gaps that would contribute to the recovery of our Argyrosomus species. As a young guy myself, I looked to objectives 3 and 5 and how I could possibly go and try and fill these gaps. So first we need to talk about what is known. South Africa has an extensive network of MPAs, yet the efficacy of many of them remains largely unassessed. There are also currently no formal estuarine protection areas. OECMs have been suggested as a context-specific alternative that could balance ecological needs with socioeconomic realities. So in order to inform effective spatial management of Dusky cob, vital information is needed, such as residency, connectivity, home ranges, and core areas. However, in South Africa, a lot of this information is lacking and really limited to short-term studies. What we have found so far, though, is that there appears to be 2 separate contingents existing: an estuarine contingent and a marine contingent, with individuals within each of these contingents showing partial migration behavior. And this just reflects the behavioral variability that we have within the population. So, what we set out to do, we set out to examine the movement behavior of estuarine and marine tag Dusky cob using a multi-method approach to inform on best management practices for the area. We also set out to investigate the residency and connectivity of estuarine and marine environments by estuarine and marine tag fish, identify home ranges, core areas of estuarine and marine tag fish to understand their spatial use, and to provide relevant information required by conservation planners and managers. So the multi-method approach that we used was by combining acoustic telemetry with citizen science dart tagging from the Oceanographic Research Institute's Cooperative Fish Tagging Project, which has now been running for just over about 40 years and has an extensive amount of data. Now, for the South Africans in the room, I'm sure a couple of you guys will know this face here. This, for those who don't, this is Dr. JD from Malta. And just over around about a decade ago now, he led a tagging and monitoring project in a collaboration with NINA, the Research Council of Norway, and our local National Research Foundation, the NRF. And this was done in the Breede River estuary system and around the Hoop MPA. So, and this is all in the Western Cape of South Africa, so we're all around about somewhere along there somewhere, and we are now further in the Western Cape. So what JD set out, he tagged 20 sub-meter carbs, 10 in the estuary and 10 in the marine environment. So let's get into this. We've got a lot to get through here. So first of all, straight away we go into the ORI data, and as you guys can see, the Hoop MPA certainly leads in the number of tags and recaptures compared to the other three zones that we have here. This is likely due to a large number of the tagging projects that have occurred and that have gone on within the Hoop MPA. These aren't the numbers I want people to focus on. The numbers I want us all to focus on are the resident recaptures relative to the number of recaptures. And as you guys can see, all the zones are pretty similar except for when we get to Hoop MPA. So, as we all remember from quiz night, what's the number one thing that can happen with the MPA? Spillover effect. So, as you can see, quite a large number compared to the other regions are actually, a large number of fish are actually moving out of the Hoop MPA and actually being recaptured in other zones. Into the acoustic telemetry. Now, for the acoustic buffs in the room here, I'm sure you guys can all appreciate this. Just how large and how extensive this data set is, ranging for a total of 8 years. Like, you just don't come across this stuff really often, and it's just so awesome. So let's get into it. So the marine-estuarine residency. So what we found straight away, estuarine tagged individuals spend significantly more time in the estuary, and marine tagged individuals spend significantly more time in the marine environment. Filling in the abacus plot a little bit more now, looking at whether they were in the estuarine marine environment, we can see that 4 out of our 20 individuals showed multiple entries and exits between this, the estuarine and marine environment. And unfortunately, quite a scary thing to see was, in all the little black circles here, is the number of recaptures. Out of all of our 20 fish, we found that 6 were confirmed to be recaptured, but I'm sure if you take a little bit of a closer look, you can see some fish just end up disappearing. And I'm sure we can connect the dots together, and we kind of know what possibly happened there. So diving into the estuary environment, we can see that fish typically spent more time in the middle and upper reaches compared to the lower reaches. But when we plot this a little bit over time, we can actually see that fish spend quite a little bit of time in the lower reaches of the river, especially when it comes down to, well, these are estuarine tagged fish here, sorry, these are gold ones here. But especially when it comes to fish 7 and 10 here, we can see that they're actually moving down to the lower reaches quite often and possibly using it as a movement corridor between the estuarine and marine realm. And unfortunately, with our marine tag bunch here, they were only tagged in late 2019, and we unfortunately lost a lot of, receivers were removed from the middle and upper reaches, so we just don't have that depth of data for our marine tagged individuals, but we can see that they were actually going up and using into the middle reaches of the estuary. Now, to debunk not debunk a little myth, but a little bit of a question. It is quite a known little thing that cob fishing at night, especially in the estuary, quite a big thing, and people often wonder, well, what's happening during the day? Are these cob moving out, or they're moving somewhere else? No, they're just not interested in what you're putting out there, clearly, because as we can see this is now comparing diel residency within each reach, and the fish typically stay where they are. They're not really moving further up, they're not really moving further down, they're just hanging where they want to be. Now getting into core areas and home ranges. So we were able to see that home ranges extended along the entire length of the estuary for our estuarine tagged friends, and showing patchy core areas moving also all the way down. However, with our marine tag bunch, we could see that there was a little bit of a home range up in the upper reaches, but mainly centered all around the lower to middle reaches of the estuary. Looking at the seasonally, we're actually able to see that between summer and winter, they actually had a bit of a range expansion comparing winter to summer. And it wasn't just both for the estuarine, it was also for the marine tag fish. So quite a bit of an interesting one. Now, let's get into the marine side of things. So from what we could see, that fish actually spent most of their time in St. Sebastian Bay, then followed by the Hoop MPA in the western boundary. So we're probably all thinking, oh no, MPA is not working. Well, and in fact it is. So we can actually see that our single estuarine tagged fish that actually went into the marine environment quite a bit was moving between St. Sebastian Bay and the Hoop MPA. And much is said for the rest of our marine guys, except for number 8 here. As we can see, he was the only guy actually moving between the Hoop and the western boundary. Now, getting into the home ranges and core areas, our single estuarine tag guy had just his home range and core areas was mainly centered around St. Sebastian Bay. Whereas with our marine tag fish, we could see that it occurred within all 3 of our marine zones, and especially in the MPA, which was just so important and so great. Looking at the seasonally, our single estuarine tag fish, I don't know how, it's probably not it's only one sample, but he showed that he had a range expansion during summer. Don't know how accurate this is, limited data, but when we look at the marine tagged individuals, once again, we see range expansion moving from summer into winter, with them using and moving in a lot more. So, what does all of this mean? So, as I said just now, what we could see definitely was the existence of 2 separate contingents here, especially between the marine and estuarine, with a couple individuals showing evidence of partial migration. And what this could mean for the cob population in the Breede River is that it helps with the regulation and the maintenance of the population. When it comes to the number of recaptures, once again, such a big problem. Actually, 5 out of our 6 recaptures all occurred within the estuary. And this, along with all their use all the way up the estuary, just shows, once again, how important it is for us to try and get some protection into our estuary areas. Just from the home ranges and stuff, so what we could definitely see was fish were using the entire range of the estuary, especially with our estuarine tagged fish. They also had core areas ranging over the entire range of the estuary and were overlapping with marine tagged individuals down in the lower to middle reaches. Seasonal variation also showed home ranges and core areas expanding during winter, likely fish looking for a bit more thermal refuge or possibly looking for food, with things becoming a bit more scarce in winter. On the marine side of things, we could see that core areas and home ranges existed in all 3 of the marine zones, so fish were moving all around, most for sure. A large portion of the MPA was covered by home ranges and core areas, so it's great to see that fish are definitely making use of the MPA, especially in acoustic data. And only one fish was, the only single estuarine tagged fish was found in St. Sebastian Bay. Once again, just kind of highlighting how important these adjacent coastal zones of estuaries, how important they are for our estuarine contingent fish. So, in conclusion, we found evidence supporting the estuarine marine contingent theory, as well as partial migration. Residency, home ranges, core areas, and recaptures highlight the importance of the estuary and adjacent marine environments to Dusky cob, and the value in trying to protect these areas. And effective protection of Duskies requires management that accounts for habitat use across the entire estuarine and marine realm, rather than trying to focus on these as single ecosystem units. And then these are just some references, and then a big thank you to all the collaborators and everyone that helped. The last time we were here at Lionfish Symposium, a late friend of mine ended off his cob talk with remember to cuddle your cobble Joe, and I've decided to go one further and add hug away your mull away. So thank you, everybody.